Hey Lakeview, it's Mo again. I wanted to just quickly talk with you about the parts of the tree and how those different parts of the tree function to create a healthy tree. So if your teacher will allow it, go ahead and stand up where you're at, and I want you are going to become a tree right now. So first things first, imagine you're drawing a tree and you're just drawing in that top part of the tree, right? The green part. So right now you are growing the top of the tree. And the top of the tree with the green part is all the branches, and on the branches are the leaves. The leaves are where all the magic happens in the tree. Now there's an important thing that happens in the leaves called photosynthesis. You might not have learned about it yet, but everybody say it with me. Photosynthesis. Photosynthesis. Now photosynthesis is a process by which the tree takes sunlight and it takes carbon dioxide along with water, and it creates sugar. And then it also creates a byproduct of oxygen. Thank you, trees. So that sugar is the tree's food, right? Trees don't go shopping at the grocery store to get its food. It makes its own food, right? It's a producer. Now, from the top of the tree with the branches and the leaves, I want everybody to make that, right? We're creating the top, and I want you to pretend that you're putting a crown on top of your head, right? You're putting your hands up and a crown. So from here on out, you have just learned a new word, and that word is crown. And crown are the branches and the leaves of the tree. So important stuff happens up there, and it's called photosynthesis. Photosynthesis. Remember that word. It'll come in handy later. So the next part of the tree from the crown is this part of the tree. Now on you, it's called the trunk. Guess what it's called on the tree? It's the trunk. You already knew that, right? So the trunk is pretty important. Now, the trunk provides strength for the tree. Now, who remembers back when we just talked about the tree cookies and that middle part of the tree, the dead part of the tree, the heartwood? That heartwood, along with all of the other cells, the xylem, the phloem, all of the other parts, create the trunk, and that is the strength and the stability of the tree. And the trunk's whole job is to hold the leaves up, and the leaves are trying to get to the sunlight, and then the trunk also transports water up, and it transports the food down to the roots and out to the branches. So lots of stuff happening in the trunk. It's a highway, if you will, for all the things that are going up and down. Now the next part of the tree, you guys will probably all know, that's the part of the tree that's underground. There's that called, giving you a little hint right there. Those are the roots of the tree. Now the roots are pretty important. The roots do three different things. They have three jobs. So number one, they're also providing stability for the tree. The trunk gives the upright stability, and the roots give the lateral stability. Now, a lot of people think that roots go straight down, and there are some roots that go down, but most of the roots are actually really shallow, and they go pretty wide. Now, if you think about the crown that we just created, if you look at a tree outside and you see how far the branches spread, the roots of the tree are going to spread out as far as that crown, if not further. So anytime you think about if you're digging in your backyard, you may be digging into the roots of that tree. So that's something construction workers have to think about when they're building houses where trees are already in place. So some stability to the tree. Now we talked about a minute ago, we just talked about the trunk transports water up to the leaves, right? Because the leaves need water for photosynthesis. Now the water doesn't come from the leaves, it comes from the roots. The roots absorb the water and it sends it up the trunk of the tree to the leaves. And then I also said that the excess food comes from the leaves, and it will either get sent out to different parts of the tree that need it, or it gets stored in the roots. Now we talked about earlier how trees have two growing seasons. They've got their early season in the spring and summer, and then they're late in the late summer and fall. And then whatever the tree doesn't need, it will store. So if it grew a ton that year and it has a lot of excess sugars, those will get stored in the roots, and then later on the tree can use it. So sometimes if we have, like what we just had in October with that early ice storm, a lot of tree branches fell off, and the tree will get a signal like Mayday, Mayday, something's happening. And it will send those resources to the part of the tree that was damaged so that it can regrow it. That's what the tree's goal is always, is to regrow. So those are the roots. Now, one other part of the tree that covers the entire part, right, it's all over the branches and it's all over the trunk. You may remember this one, it's bark. Now, bark's pretty cool. Bark to a tree is kind of like skin to you. So your skin is your protector. And so I always use a shield of armor, like a knight has, and that's its protectant. So that the bark keeps things like insects out, keeps fungus, bacteria out, and it slows down things like fire. So like a tree, its bark the bark could burn, but the inside of the tree doesn't. And it can slow down woodpeckers. The woodpeckers are often gonna peck right through, but little tiny holes aren't a big deal. Obviously, lots of holes are. So those are the parts of the tree, and now that you know those, then you can I'm going to show you a little bit of the tree cookies that I have with me, so you can kind of see some more up close parts. You can see here I've got this tree cookie, and this one's a Douglas fir. One of our foresters collected it off the side of a mountain in New Mexico. So there's some things to be learned from there. It was growing on the side of the mountain. We'll talk about that maybe in just a few minutes. And then the other tree I have is a black willow, and obviously it doesn't even fit in my screen here, it's so big. So these two together, let's see if I can get it in one shot. So I can't really. So looking at the two of them, if you had to guess, which one do you think is the oldest? Just looking at the size. So most people are going to guess that the black willow, this guy, is the oldest, but I'll give you a little close up, if you will. You can kind of see those tree rings. Those are pretty big tree rings. And this tree is actually, I think it's about 39 years old. You can see some cracking in this tree cookie. Most tree cookies, as it age, this one we didn't do an amazing job of sanding and sealing it down. And as the tree dries out, since it was a very liquid thing, there's lots of liquid, lots of water in trees. And as it dries, it cracks. You can see I've got another big crack there. And so that one's about 39 years old, pretty cool. Now this guy, get up close, you see all those tree rings? Now, as I get closer, you might be able to read those words. We see Jamestown and Pilgrims. So you might have studied some of this already. Jamestown was one of our first settlements. The Pilgrims, you've probably heard of them. This tree was already, starting at the center, right? It's our heartwood. Starting there, this tree was already 15 or 20 years old when Jamestown was settled. So this tree is over 400 years old. And as I pan out a little bit, you can see it's got a lot of things that we can learn from looking at this tree cookie happen to this tree. Now, as I come a little closer, you can see right here we have black willow. So the black willow, this guy over here that we just looked at, he started growing when this tree was already this big. So this tree was already that wide around when the black willow started growing. So just kind of mind-boggling to look at that. And then another thing that's kind of cool, this tree was already this big when Oklahoma became a state. So it was already that whole thing around when Oklahoma became a state. So pretty cool things. There's some neat stuff to see in the center. You can actually see two different tree rings. Now earlier when we talked about that could have been a branch, or I said, remember, it could have been two different trees. This one I think was two different trees, and then this spot right here, this dark spot, indicates that the trees probably grew really close to each other, and then eventually this big tree kind of took over and it became one tree. So really cool things that you could see. Obviously 200 years later you would have never known there were two trees in there. The only way we know now is because we have a nice slice of it to see. Now you also can see some other dark spots along the rings of the tree, and that's going to indicate typically fire. We typically think of fire as being detrimental to trees, but it's not always, right? Small fires are typically fine. Big fires are bad. Obviously there was a small fire on this tree. and it lived a couple hundred more years after. It didn't impact it much at all. Some other cool things that you might not be able to see. Oh, you can totally see them. You see there's cracks in the tree rings here. That's from wind shake. We knew this tree was on the side of a mountain, and so there's the cracks in the rings from it being that growing on that spot on the mountain. So pretty cool. Now you'd think that growing on a mountain would be a tough place to grow. Obviously this tree did really well if it grew that long. But the difference obviously between the two trees, this tree that grew really fast versus this tree that grew really slow, was just different climate, right? So two different places. It grew probably in a nice, probably near a pond or something, this black willow. And this one growing on the side of a mountain, less soil, less nutrients, probably less rain. And this one had an abundance of rain. So that's why the big difference is, but pretty neat thing to see. So thank you guys and have a great day. Bye.